Hello, viewers. Today, our guest is Mr. Grishanov Anton Alexandrovich. Mr. Anton is the chief researcher at the Institute of Current International Problems of the Diplomatic Academy of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Anton, welcome to this interview.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
First of all, we'd like to mention here that case of terrorist attack on Crocus City Hall, as well as hydro tower targeting Nord Stream. Do you think through such acts, the Western countries are proving themselves as patrons of terror, if not terrorist states?
Well, I'd like to go in some details because there are different issues. One issue is the open terrorist war that is fought against Russia by Ukrainian states and states that are standing behind this Zelensky regime. And they are even not disguising what they're doing. They're targeting civilians, they're targeting civilian infrastructure, and of course, they're targeting our infrastructure that is used to supply Russian military complex and Russian industrial complex. So it's complex operations, and of course, as we understand, they have received permission from the United States. But of course, you've seen that after this attack on Nord Stream, America denied responsibility, and they tried to make it look like Ukrainians have done it themselves, which is ridiculous because they don't have possibilities, they don't have tools to organize such complex attacks. But since it's also attack on European states that were engaged in this project, they tried to not talk about it too much because it's Russian, their Euro-Atlantic solidarity. But we will continue watching, and we hope that one day maybe some other political forces will come to power in Europe, and they'll try to organize investigation of this attack, which actually damaged not only Russia, but which damaged also in perspective European infrastructure and energy infrastructure. As for Crocus attack, this horrible attack, we know that it was organized by Islamic State's members. But there are several questions that are not answered. And I'm not part of investigation team, and I cannot speak for them. But I know this open information that these terrorists, they were heading to Ukrainian border, and they were assisted by someone from Ukrainian side, and that Ukrainian government and especially Ukrainian military intelligence that has been organizing terrorist attacks against Russia for several years, even before this open phase of conflict started. They didn't try to cooperate, of course, with our government or with any international structures to prove that they were not involved or to explain why these terrorists were heading to Ukrainian territory. We also know that there are several complaints from European governments that Ukraine has become a melting pot for jihadists who came from Middle East to Ukrainian soil. Maybe some are fighting or were fighting for Ukrainian army, and they also spoke about it openly, especially in the opening months of the conflict. They were forming battalions of jihadists that are fighting against Russia from Syria, from other places, and of course some of the jihadists are involved in Islamic State. So we'll be following investigation surely, but of course we will also need to know. Maybe this was kind of rogue attack, and Ukrainian government didn't know that it was going to happen. But why, in this case, United States had exact information about the possible venue of this attack and about possible terms of this attack? How did it happen? And of course, I'm not saying that the West is involved openly in supporting terrorists. Attacks, we were cooperating with Western intelligence services, with Western governments for decades, fighting terrorism, fighting Al-Qaeda, then fighting Islamic States. But there are some powers in West, there are some people in Western intelligence services that consider it as a useful tool that can be directed against Russia or against other enemies. And it's worrisome, and that's why we started this military operation in Ukraine, because we are seeing that West is trying to make Ukraine as a project that is used as to project terror against Russian citizens, against Russian infrastructure, against Russian state.
When Western nations claim to be fighting terrorism, counterterrorism experts say international terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and Islamic State are covertly or overtly serving as mercenaries of the Western intelligence establishment. You are an expert on counterterrorism also. So what is your assessment and opinion on this matter?
Well, it's a complex situation because, as I said, as I just said, West has been involved in counterterrorism operations, and of course, we need to say that, for example, Donald Trump administration had played some role in degrading abilities of Islamic State to organize attacks against Europe or against Russia also. But after some years of Biden administration, this ability continued to grow. And we see the growing panic in Europe also. But coming back to your question, there was, of course, policy of cooperation between some parts of Western intelligence and some radical extremist forces from Middle East, from other parts of the world, and it's going back to Afghanistan in 1980s, after which they decided that some jihadists can be also used to fight against common enemies, and it happened in the Balkans, especially in Bosnia, and it happened in Libya, even in the 90s, when there were some people, as you said, like mercenaries who were hired by MI6 to target Gaddafi. They did it fighting against Shia regime in Iran, and of course they did maybe cowardly by supporting some terrorist organizations that were fighting against Russia in the Caucasus, in Chechnya, because we've seen that after the end of the Chechen conflict, some members of this regime, separatist regime that was responsible for terrorist attacks against Russia, they found asylum in either in UK or in United States and in other Western countries. But there are some facts, and it's not a conspiracy theories that for some time, like Western intelligence have cooperated with people who were organizing terrorist attack against the same Western states. I don't know why they did it, because it showed us that they have lacked analytical ability to consider danger that came from the terrorists. Remember attack in 1998 against American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, and one of the chief organizers of these attacks, a man called Ali Muhammad, who was American citizen who had lived in the United States for more than a decade, who was openly CIA agent and FBI agent, also who was serving in the American Army, and who used classified information to provide Al-Qaeda with manual for organizing terrorist attacks. And he was openly planning this attack by living in California, and then he was arrested by coming back from Africa after this attack happened. But we didn't know, and we still don't know what happened to him. He vanished. And another person who was organizing the same attack, Anas al-Libi, who was on MI6 payroll in Libya, the person hired to kill Gaddafi. And after Kenya and Tanzania attack, he also disappeared, and he emerged against when we started this campaign against Gaddafi in 2011, and then he was suddenly arrested by American troops. He was taken to the United States, and suddenly he died in prison after several weeks, as I remember, on American soil. And we didn't hear testimony from him. And there are so many episodes like this, and you can also look at the history of Syrian conflict when American government tried to support uh, even openly Jabhat al-Nusra, which was officially branch of Al-Qaeda. And it was like schizophrenia because at the same time they were fighting Al-Qaeda, they were targeting Osama bin Laden, but if you read the memoir by Ben Rhodes, who was right-hand man on foreign policy by Barack Obama, he wrote that he openly proposed to send heavy arms, heavy weapons to Jabhat al-Nusra, which was also Al-Qaeda. So it said a lot about American policy planning and about American adventurism. And of course, we can expect such incidents again from our former American partners who are unfortunately our opponents at the moment, but we still open for cooperating with them on counterterrorism in different parts of the world, and maybe some more responsible politicians who do not want to cooperate with extremists and jihadists and who understand how dangerous they are will come to power in the United States, in Europe, and will continue this cooperation in near future. I want to believe in this.
From media reports, we know a very large volume of Western military hardware sent to Ukraine is ending up into the hands of terrorists and jihadists. By having free access to weapons, do you think the entire world, including nations in the global south, should feel worried about intensifying of terrorist threats in the future?
Well, not only in the global south, but only in the west as well. Well, it's also not news, I believe, because what happened with American weapons that were provided to terrorists, then they were not considered terrorists, but in our opinion, they were in Afghanistan in the 1980s. It spread through this region, and it was used against Americans themselves after they tried to start fighting Al-Qaeda. What happened with the American Western weapons in Balkans after Bosnia War, after Kosovo War, because we know that some people, especially in Kosovo, they were openly involved in terrorist activities. They were considered by the State Department as a terrorist organization, KLA, Kosovo Liberation Army. But they changed their mind, of course, when they understood that they are a useful tool against Serbian regime. But also Kosovo became kind of black hole in Europe that were used in arms traffic, also in drugs traffic, and West denied to see it, of course. And also that happened with other conflict zones, and unfortunately, West doesn't understand that they're hurting themselves, they're hurting their own citizens. Some maybe Western politicians believe that they're helping democracy cause in Ukraine because they believe their own propaganda, but they don't see that Ukrainian intelligence services that have a very long history of corruption, of arms smuggling, and so on. They're comparison with criminal underworld, and this criminal underworld is cooperating with terrorist organizations, and this can also become a problem for global south. There are a lot of weapons in global south, especially after America pulled out of Afghanistan and left Afghanistan to its own people who are divided between different Islamist organizations. And surprisingly, Taliban is looking more solid than the people who are fighting against Taliban, like Islamic State and other radical organizations. That's not a good alternative, of course, in my view, but that's the reality. And well, that's one of the results of American adventurism, of American lack of strategic planning, of America decision to be involved, America's decision to be involved in different conflicts around the world without some exit strategy. And that can happen in Ukraine. One day, Americans may become tired of Ukrainian conflict because they don't see this nice media story of fast victory against Russia. And what then? What can happen with this state, which is dysfunctional, which is ruled by regime that is unpopular and by different oligarch factions and then criminal factions and so on, and that doesn't even control its own arms arsenal. I believe it can lead us to some tragedies, but will cooperate with Global South and with other powers, responsible powers, to make sure it doesn't happen. Crocus was a signal that there are some very wrong and very dangerous things going on in Ukraine, and there are some jihadists who can come to different parts of the world, of the globe, and the west, east, south, and organized new attacks. Because when such black hole emerged in some parts of Europe or Asia or Middle East, jihadists come to there very fast, and they're like parasites. I'm sorry for this comparison, but I believe it's justified, and they use it until they take all resources from this place, then they go to another place. And Ukraine is this place at the moment.
Right. Mr. Anton, actually, on June 27th, during debate, former US President Donald Trump clearly said Ukraine is losing the war and running short of soldiers. Under this scenario, why Joe Biden and his NATO allies still emphasizing on sending billions of dollars to Kiev, and what may happen after collapse of Zelensky's regime in Kiev?
Well, it's in one way it's policy, of course, because Joe Biden is deeply unpopular. He's deeply unpopular within his own party. He lost some success stories. If you look at his foreign policy record, even though he was running as foreign policy expert with half-century experience in foreign policy, but he didn't have any good results. Well, one is Afghanistan debacle, another is some conflicts with the American allies like France, and also in Ukraine, he promised his allies, he promised his supporters fast victory, the blitzkrieg against Russia, using old German expression, but they didn't reach it. They didn't crush the economy by sanctions. They didn't make sure that the Ukrainians can win, because you cannot, like Viktor Orban said, you cannot win, you cannot defeat Russia on battlefield. It's impossible, even if you have some NATO backing. But anyway, Joe Biden, of course, thinks, and Democrats, they think that when they started this mess, they need to make sure it continue, because if they admit that they didn't reach these aims, they admit they are quite ineffective in foreign policy. And why do voters need to vote for them in America if they cannot do such simple things, if they cannot even fulfill their promises? And they promise that they can make NATO look solid, that Joe Biden says even now that we have this absurd situation in Democratic Party when they asks him to come from to come out, not to participate in election, and he says that I recreated NATO. And how did he do it if NATO cannot defend Russia in his view, right? So that's why he wants to continue and prolong this conflict. After the election, maybe there's some development, but we need to wait and see who is the president of America. Another reason is power of American military-industrial complex that is making billions on Ukrainian conflict, on some other conflicts like Gaza conflict, and they want to also to continue it. And lobbyists for military-industrial complex, they don't care if these arms are going to be in the terrorist hands and criminals' hands, or if people are suffering, or if thousands are dying. They just want to have money flowing in their pockets. And definitely that's why we cannot really cooperate and have some productive dialogue with the West, because Western system is in such crisis. Western politicians cannot be responsible negotiators from the American side, from European side, and only if Russia fulfills its president's promise to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, we can see our opponents on the other side of negotiation table. But I don't have very optimistic view on this, because we've seen the previous administration, Trump administration. The Trump administration was the first one that started sending little aid to Ukraine, little military aid to Ukraine before the conflict started. And Trump representative on Ukrainian issue was Kurt Volker, who was at the same time receiving salary as a lobbyist for Ukrainian regime, Petro Poroshenko, and who was lobbying for Javelin missile supplies for Ukrainian side. And Trump is also very dependent on military industrial complex. And we'll need to wait and see. They can say a lot of nice things like Trump, like J.D. Vance, but we don't see their strategy for solving this conflict. And definitely the only way to solve this conflict is to move forward and to let Ukrainian people understand that it's up to them. That they need to make this regime, like I said, collapse, and they need to elect some new representatives who can be not pro-war, but who can be pro-peace. And it's not an impossible story, because, as I said, Zelensky is unpopular. He's acting like a dictator. But I think that Ukrainian society, and I believe that most of the society are still our brothers and sisters, our Slavic brothers and sisters. They don't want this eternal war against Russia. It's a natural, and we even see that, according to some polls, Ukrainian youth started to use Russian language more than Ukrainian language within the last 2 years. It makes us understand that this policy, Zelensky policy, is failing.
Right. Would like to know, Mr. Anton, as Joe Biden has allowed Zelensky to hit Russian territories with advanced missiles and drones supplied by the US. What would be the consequence of such a dangerous attempt? I mean, if Zelensky attacks Russian territories?
Well, we'll act carefully, and we will not make emotions move our policy, because we understand that this is a dangerous situation, very tense situation, and we want to avoid military conflict with NATO. Even when we understand that NATO is standing behind this regime, and the NATO is directing it. And of course, Russian citizens, Russian peaceful population is dying because this attack. But we'll make sure that American side and European side understands when they are involved in this conflict, and this we have seen after this NATO summit. They want to make NATO more involved in this conflict. They become side of the conflict. And if they are side of the conflict, it moves us closer to the possible nuclear escalation. So it's the only way, on some stage, the only way to make escalation look not the only possible scenario is to start negotiation and to make Ukrainian side, to make Kyiv sit at the negotiation table. And we don't seek this escalation. We know this nuclear escalation is a catastrophic scenario for the whole world. And some theorists are saying that probably NATO will not sacrifice London or Paris for some Ukrainian city or even a Polish city, but I disagree with it. I believe that We need to avoid such talk. We need to focus on a situation when Russian army is moving forward. Russian army is doing what it can to provide security for Russian citizens, and but of course, certainly, American side and European side must also know that if they are directly involved, if they're hitting Russian territory, Russia can answer, and if Russia answers, it can also lead us to such scenarios, such possibilities that we cannot even imagine. We don't want it, they don't want it, and we want this conflict to end as soon as possible, but we will not sacrifice Russian territory, we will not sacrifice security for Russian citizens to end this conflict, because it will only prolong it for the future. We don't need such pause like that happened before the conflict started, when they were preparing for a military phase, and they started this military phase, even if they blame us for this. That's it.
Mr. Anton, you know that we are talking to you from Bangladesh, and there is an excellent and growing relations between Dhaka and Moscow. And we are the only newspaper, very proudly we say, we are the only newspaper from Bangladesh which has been consistently defending Russia's special military operations in Ukraine, and we have been vigorously confronting the propaganda of the so-called Western mainstream media. In your opinion, it's my final question actually, in your opinion, how much important is the relationship between Dhaka and Moscow, and how do you see the role played by my newspaper?
Thank you very much. I just want to thank you for your position, for your support, because it's very important. It's very important to let people of Bangladesh and global South to understand the complexity of this situation. There's a lot of Western propaganda, and that you're fighting against it. It's real journalism. I know that you personally suffered a lot for your sincere position during previous decades, but sometimes for journalists, for fair people, it's unfortunately the only way to move forward to make themselves heard, and I'm proud that there are such papers like yours that are supporting this position. And I also want to say that, of course, people in Bangladesh deserve understanding of the situation, because Bangladesh in its history suffered so much because of American position, because of American lack of understanding of psychology of global south. And remember what happened 50 years ago. For American, it's ancient history. For Bangladesh, it's still fresh memories and understand. And what happened during Henry Kissinger term. And surely, acting together, we need to make United States and its allies find out that the world has changed, and there's not going to be such tragedies, and that now global south and global majority totally will decide how the world order will develop. And of course, we hope that our American partners, former partners and future partners will understand it, and will be act together to make more safe, more secure world. But we need to fight for it, and thank you for fighting for it as a journalist and as a person.
Mr. Grishanov Anton Alexandrovich, thank you very, very much for giving your precious time to us, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor. Thank you.